Hello and welcome to another episode of You Don't Know Jack, an HHN fancast. I'm your host, Nick. This fancast, which is not affiliated with Universal's Halloween Horror Nights in any way, aims to explore the story of the previous years as well as speculation on upcoming houses, zones, and everything to do with the greatest horror event of all time. Today, we kick off what I hope to be a sub-series of episodes focusing around the history of the icons of Halloween Horror Nights. We start off with the one who is possibly the most popular HHN icon of all time. He is the fright in your night. He is the true icon of horror. He is your nightmare fuel. He is Halloween Horror Nights. He is Jack. Yes, Jack Schmidt, aka Jack the Clown, will be the focus of today's History of episode. We will be going over both the character's fictional origin as well as the real-world behind-the-scenes work that led to the creation of this HHN icon. He is my personal favorite icon and the namesake of this podcast, so I couldn't imagine a better icon to kick off the history aspect of this show. So let's not waste any more time and dive into the history of the original HHN icon, Jack. Now, when it comes to Jack, it's impossible to properly tell his origin without at least touching on the history of the event itself. While an overall in-depth history of Halloween Horror Nights is a story for another time, let's first go over what led to the creation of Jack in the first place. While Jack's first appearance was in the year 2000 at Halloween Horror Nights 10, what led to his appearance took place in the years prior. For the first few years of HHN, the idea of an icon hosting the overall event was fairly inconsistent and borderline non-existent. The classic Universal monsters were present, as well as Beetlejuice being somewhat of an icon for the very first Fright Nights, but it wasn't until HHN 5 in 1995 where we saw the first real use of an icon. Halloween Horror Nights 5 was hosted by the Crypt Keeper from a TV series called Tales from the Crypt. After that, Boris Karloff's Imhotep, or The Mummy, hosted Halloween Horror Nights 9 in 1999. But that didn't really feel quite the same as a true icon, as it was again just prominent use of a character from the Universal Classic Monster Library. However, at the end of the event in 1999, guests exiting the park were handed a survey asking them what their biggest phobia was, and Halloween Horror Nights would never be the same again. In the time leading up to Halloween Horror Nights 10, a certain demented clown could be seen roaming around Universal Orlando Resort as a test to see how guests would react. Brought to life by a performer named James Keaton, Jack the Clown made his debut to the public, with an overwhelming response to the survey being that clowns terrify people more than anything else. Universal wasted no time in creating the very first original icon for Halloween Horror Nights. Under the guide of the Senior Director of Creative Development, Michael Aiello, and former head of HHN Creative, J. Michael Roddy, the Universal Creative team approached the challenge of creating a terrifying clown that was different from the other clowns people were used to seeing in films and other media. Going through different designs, the key to his unique look came down to the wig, nails, cheekbones, and chin. By the end of the design process, which Keaton was a part of, they settled on a very ornate sculpt, with big cheekbones, chin, and sharp, chipped nails. Keaton even recounts that these aspects of the makeup helped shape his performance, as he would view Jack's hands as his killing tools, which would result in always having very careful placement of his hands. His look was completed with decaying prosthetic teeth, which ended up dictating some of Jack's speech patterns and the overall breathy, slobbery nature he would have. The iconic laugh was left to James Keaton himself to come up with. Keaton decided to give the character more of a bestial roar that would trickle down into a clown laugh, making him more unique and animalistic than the scary clowns that came before him. While Keaton has been very humble about his involvement with the creation of Jack, Aiello has made it clear that there is no Jack without James Keaton, and no one can bring him to life the way he does. After testing proved to be a huge success, promotion began for HHN 10, with a complete focus on Jack being the reason to attend. One unforgettable ad saw the birth of a now iconic line surrounding the character. Not afraid of the dark? You don't know Jack. Thus, Jack was born and was a massive success, forever shaping the future of the event. Jack showed Universal that the creation of original characters with deep lore was something that would entice fans to keep returning to the event, wanting to be scared by the icon but also brought into his world and story. There was a love for this character that we should fear, and this would only be the beginning of Jack's long history with the event. Following Halloween Horror Nights 10, Jack would appear the very next year as a replacement for his brother Eddie following the 9/11 tragedy in the US. Using the slogan "Jack's back," he would be played by a different actor due to the short notice of the change. After this year, however, James Keaton would always return to portray the character in media as well as in the park, including his most recent appearance at the time of recording at HHN 30. Jack would go on to make an appearance at Halloween Horror Nights 10, 11, 16, 17, 25, and 30 as the main or one of the main icons of the year's event. However, he has made countless appearances through the years in house references, props, other icon stories, and shows. Jack really is everywhere, and in many people's minds is the true symbol and icon of Halloween Horror Nights. Now, when it comes to Jack's fictional backstory, things get pretty crazy. Things have changed and evolved over the years, but the main thread has remained the same, with many events adding to the lore and expanding on his rich history. This character has 20 years of storytelling behind him, and there is very likely much more to come. He is responsible for the real-world creation of many icons, which means his story ties into other HHN icons. One in particular, Dr. Oddfellow. Having Dr. Oddfellow finally make his debut at the event during HHN 32 truly expanded the lore and even clarified the secret to Jack's immortality. But today is all about Jack. So, without further ado, let's dive into the story of Jack Schmidt. Jack was born in the late 1800s at Shady Brook Rest Home and Sanitarium along with his brother Eddie. John Jack Schmidt and Eddie's family were extremely abusive, eventually driving Jack to run away and leave Eddie behind. At some point, Jack started a riot, which he used to escape Shady Brook and would eventually grow to become a carnival performer. Escaping from his poor and highly abusive family, he ran away to join the circus, finding salvation at Dr. Oddfellow's Carnival of Thrills, where he would love performing for children with his pratfalls and practical pranks. But Jack had a secret. It turns out that Jack was wanted by police for a series of abductions and disappearances of small children throughout the southern United States. Police officials and the FBI soon caught on to the pattern of the missing children, which led them to a traveling circus. Fearing capture, Jack revealed to Dr. Oddfellow that he was secretly capturing and killing the children during times when he was feeling particularly hungry. He hoped that Dr. Oddfellow would protect him. He thought wrong. It turned out that Dr. Oddfellow himself was wanted by police for supposed accidental deaths of patrons from years earlier while performing under a different name. Unknown to everyone, their deaths were actually sacrifices made by Oddfellow to the Zodiac in order to strengthen his mystical power and extend his life. Oddfellow has his own lengthy history, which deserves its own episode. However, it's important to know that due to these sacrifices and years in pursuit of immortality, Oddfellow had figured out the secret, capturing and manipulating souls with a green mystical skull which resided in the top of his staff. When Jack confessed to Dr. Oddfellow, instead of helping him, Oddfellow attempted to kill Jack and stuff his body in a box. This wasn't as simple as he thought, as while trying to dispose of Jack into the box, Jack would awaken and fight back, slashing at Dr. Oddfellow's face and scarring him permanently while also getting Oddfellow's blood on him. In response, Oddfellow smacked Jack with his cane of souls, defeating him and trapping him in a box. To be precise, he was stuffed somewhat fittingly into an old Jack-in-the-Box prop. In hopes of distancing himself from any more trouble, Oddfellow sealed away the box containing Jack's body inside a house of horrors, and wiped away any reference to the murderous clown from his circus. Years later, the carnival was sold by Dr. Oddfellow, and the various dark rides and exhibits were split and sent to various owners around the United States, including the House of Horrors and its grisly secret. For decades, no one would know what became of Jack Schmidt after that night, and he was eventually all but forgotten. However, unbeknownst to either the ringmaster or the clown at the time, the blood Oddfellow shed onto Jack during their struggle would trigger a mystical transformation in the clown's dead body, bestowing the dark magic and immortality Oddfellow infused into himself upon Jack as well, twisting his broken body and already corrupt soul into an eternal, maniacal terror. Jack was less than alive, but not dead. He lay in a state of hibernation, waiting for the day that his box would eventually be opened. 60 years later, in the fall of 1980, a television crew from the BBC was documenting the Great Dark Rides of America. They journeyed throughout the eastern seaboard looking for forgotten carnival rides and attractions, and eventually stumbled upon the House of Horrors, abandoned in a Louisiana junkyard. The crew received permission to film the interior of the House of Horrors and pried open the doors of the forgotten relic to step inside. The smell of decay was overpowering as the bright camera light illuminated the darkened corridors. Moving past the faded walls and hanging fabric, the smell began to increase. Eventually, reaching the center of the house's depths, where the smell was at its strongest, the cameraman panned his camera towards a series of trunks. Behind the trunks was a large wooden box, stenciled like a children's toy with one letter on each side of the box. J-A-C-K. As the cameraman streamed his camera across the box, the host moved closer and discovered a crank on the side. The host grabbed the crank and began to rotate it clockwise. It gave some resistance but eventually began to move with ease, and as it continued to rotate, a whimsy children's melody began to play. Suddenly, the music stopped and wouldn't resume no matter how much the handle was turned. In this exact moment, the camera light went out, the crank began to turn on its own, then the body of Jack Schmidt popped out of the box, affixed to a spring. After a thorough police investigation, the bodies of the 13 children Jack murdered were recovered along with Jack himself. They were prepared to be shipped to a Louisiana coroner's office for further investigation, but Jack never made it. One van was designated to transport Jack along with his box, but the van suffered a freak accident. Jack and his box were nowhere to be found. A few days later, the bodies of the BBC crew were found, victims of a brutal, unsolved murder. Throughout the following years, urban legend retellings of the tale started, with a corresponding story about the decomposing body of Jack killing once again. The legend states that Jack is searching for Dr. Oddfellow in a thirst for vengeance. The legend also states that Jack will reward anyone who releases him from his toy tomb by turning the crank with a very special reward. In the year 2000, Universal Studios purchased the old props from the old House of Horrors, including the box that Jack was supposedly trapped in for so many years. Eventually, an unsuspecting Universal employee decided to test the validity of the legend, turning the crank and unleashing Jack on the unsuspecting Halloween Horror Nights guests for the first time. The following year, though his brother Eddie was out of Shady Brook and ready to take the spotlight, Jack once again returned and stole that spotlight away, terrifying the guests of Universal Orlando once again. A few years later, in 2004, Universal decided to make a movie featuring all of the Halloween Horror Nights icons, titled Horror Nights Nightmares. However, the set and production started to go awry when the icons, Jack included, went loose and started killing all of the crew. The slaughter would also officially allow the Schmidt brothers to reunite at last, though Eddie still held some reserved animosity toward his sibling, both for abandoning him years prior and stealing his spotlight in 2001. Later, in the land of Terra Cruntis, there was a portal that was filled with relics called Maldican Pass that would transport guests into the theme park where Jack sprung loose before. Jack would host a chain-link maze called the Rat Run, where he would heckle guests as they tried to make their way through. After this, Jack disappears until it was time to celebrate Halloween Horror Nights Sweet 16. The Lord of Darkness resurrected Jack and his fellow icons to take part in the birthday festivities. The now mortal Jack was soon caught by authorities and committed to the place of his birth, Shady Brook Asylum, an institution that had suffered an inmate escape a few years earlier. Though typically isolated in the maximum security ward, Jack's mere presence seemed to have an adverse effect on the unstable population, who started to emulate the crazed clown, much to the staff's dismay. Eventually, the inmates started a mass riot, gruesomely tortured the hospital staff, and put Jack in charge of the facility. During the chaos, Jack found records that his former boss and murderer, Dr. Oddfellow, was still alive and running a small traveling carnival. Upon learning this, Jack left Shadybrook and traveled to the location of Dr. Oddfellow's dark carnival and emporium. When night fell, Jack made his way through the tents, stalking his old rival. Once reaching Dr. Oddfellow, Jack took his long overdue revenge, killing Dr. Oddfellow. Or so he believed. When he emerged, he was a changed man. During his incarceration, Jack got a taste of what it was like to run the show, and he desired to be the ringmaster of his own carnival, a carnival of carnage. He dressed himself in the bright red coat and boots of a proper ringmaster, very similar to Oddfellow before him, also adorning himself with a crude top hat and terrible trinkets of his liking. He completed the transformation with Dr. Oddfellow's prized possession, a silver-headed cane of souls topped with a mystical skull. Putting the carnival on hiatus, Jack spent the next few months traveling the world to find the right sideshow acts for his deadly carnival of carnage. He gathered a plethora of monsters, mutants, madmen, and maniacs, many with egos nearly as large as his, luring them with promises of fame, fortune, and plenty of fresh victims. This is also where Jack would meet Chance, his right-hand woman and assistant who would help him torture and kill victims during his Carnival of Carnage show. After nearly a year of preparation, Ringmaster Jack opened his Carnival of Carnage in Orlando, Florida for Halloween Horror Nights 17 in 2007. Later, in 2010, Jack would once again return with his fellow icons to reveal himself as one of the 5 minions of the icon known as Fear. Jack's desire to wreak havoc earned him the title Chaos. In this, Jack became the Herald of Chaos, thanks to his master, Fear. But after seemingly becoming drunk with power after becoming a herald, Jack decided he wanted the spotlight back from his former master, Fear, creating a sort of cult around himself which he called Jack's Maniacs. Drunk with power, Jack strived to prove that he was better than Fear in every way, believing himself to be the true incarnate of Halloween Horror Nights. He decided to prove his supremacy to everyone by expanding and improving on his Carnival of Carnage, making it more terrifying than ever before. Escaping from the lantern through his box, Jack was at last free to put his plan into effect, coercing his fellow icons to join him in celebrating the kill and restoring Halloween Horror Nights to its former glory. At the conclusion of the event, Jack and Chance were detained by authorities, with Jack sealed back inside his box and Chance being committed to Shadybrook Asylum. Though we still don't know how, Jack eventually escaped his box just in time for the 30th anniversary of Halloween Horror Nights. Creating his own realm inside of Fear's lantern, Jack welcomed guests to a realm that resembled his Carnival of Carnage, complete with every version of him through the years, Jack's Maniacs, and of course his partner, Chance. Jack, once again, was back. No longer a pawn of Fear, Jack had free reign and control over Halloween Horror Nights, proclaiming himself to be the true icon of horror. At the time of recording, Halloween Horror Nights 30 is the last time we saw Jack. It was a truly phenomenal year, and played host to my personal favorite house of all time, HHN Icons Captured. While no longer a herald for Fear, Jack has become a symbol to many HHN fans. A symbol of the event itself, as well as a sign to indicate a truly phenomenal Horror Nights season. While there are some out there who do not like the overuse of Jack, I personally can't get enough of him, and am truly itching for him to hopefully make a grand return soon. Perhaps at HHN 35? After Oddfellow had his year in the spotlight at HHN 32, he teased a confrontation with the clown in the future, perhaps setting up a year where we finally get to see Oddfellow and Jack go head-to-head one more time. Without Jack, Halloween Horror Nights would not be the event it is today. The first original icon changed the trajectory and format of HHN forever, becoming the foundation of an identity for the event as well as fans who enjoy the title Jack's Maniacs. To me, Jack is Halloween Horror Nights, and if there is one thing the past 20 plus years of horror have taught us, Jack always comes back. You can be sure that when he does, me and my fellow maniacs will be overjoyed to see him in the fog once again. Thank you for listening to this episode of You Don't Know Jack, an HHN Fancast. This podcast is not affiliated with Universal Orlando Resort or any parent companies. If you enjoyed the journey, feel free to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, remember that you don't know Jack, never go alone, and I'll see you in the fog.